results in sales. What happens to comic book shops? They close down. It's the same crap that you see with Wizards of the Coast and Magic the Gathering, constantly virtue signaling to people that don't buy their product. Meanwhile, local game stores struggle to pay the rent, as right now everybody's shut down, both in comic books and in board gaming. These companies start smelling their own farts almost exclusively. And meanwhile, on Main Street, where the comic book shops are and the Magic the Gathering board games and trading card game shops are, they struggle. Wizards of the Coast starts taking product out of the local game shop and selling it direct to customers. They start reprinting singles, selling them directly to customers, removing the reason for people to show up at local game shops, just like what's happening to comic book shops. The people that a lot of these comic books appeal to don't ever set foot in a comic book shop and never will. You see Bleeding Fool reporting, why are some of Marvel's less popular titles not appearing on their release schedule anymore? Notably, a handful that were seemingly built on social justice politics have completely vanished from the calendar. And Abby Green thinks he knows why. I'm assuming that's the writer of this. I mean, ultimately, sales matter. And I've talked about how the tides of change, the seas of change, or whatever you might want to call them, seem to be coming through here. And we've seen it affect Kickstarter. We've seen it affect Marvel Comics. We've seen it, affect all sorts of companies that seem to lean a certain way, are interested in certain ways. So the article reads, an interesting selection of comics are missing from Marvel's schedule. Newsarama's revealed that Marvel's slowly returning to release schedule is revised, with some titles built on social justice politics not appearing along those whose scribes are some of the worst they've employed for a decade or so. Specifically, here are some titles you won't be seeing for at least 2 months and possibly more. X-Men, Captain America, Fantastic Four, Wolverine, Spider-Man. Geez, what happened there?
It's all my fault. I drove Spider-Man away.
Conan the Barbarian and Star Wars are the highest profile ongoing titles that are missing in action. Other notables are the entirety of the outlined subline titles. Champions, Power Pack, and New Warriors are not included. And while the pair of Empire Zero issues are present, the main series itself and the various tie-in titles planned for April and subsequent months are unaccounted for. Some of the flagship titles highlighted by rotten writers like Dan Slott and Jason Aaron, and the new take on the New Warriors has already been in discussion, as it represents the most notable current example of their social justice propaganda in motion. Most amazing has to be that they say all titles pertaining to Outlawed Event are suspended from release. And while reading this earlier article, I noticed this in the comment section. Quote, X-Men is missing from Empire 1 is also not listed. Miss Marvel is an odd omission, though. Says she was due out on the same day as Miles Morales, April 1st. And Miss Marvel might be because of Outlawed. And based on the repellent politics of the book that the book is built on, it better be that they dropped it all together. It's sold very low over the years, and everything going on right now would only make it a lost leader, since Marvel's funding has already taken enough of a hit from being unable to deliver than sell their wares to limited stores. What's so odd about the book being omitted from the list of releases? Nothing, really. It's been one of the most blatant productions Marvel's ever come with. Huge waste of resources, even to go such lengths as to promote it as the biggest treasure ever and adapt it to TV and film, and now it looks like time for change. They may have decided that it's best to let it go. Well, we don't know. We don't know. Certainly there are other books that are also omitted from this list, and it's not enough to know for sure. But, what's interesting is when we look at the comic book industry right now, and we look at what's selling and what isn't selling, where it's selling, well, it's not, these pandery books. They're not selling. These kind of woke topics aren't selling. Look where all the independent comic book creators went. They had two choices to choose from, essentially. They had Kickstarter and they had Indiegogo to go to. And they all chose to go to Indiegogo because Kickstarter had practiced some censorship in the past. And you have people like Candor Cam. Her job was comics outreach lead at Kickstarter. one of many of the actual Asian comic book writers. Imagine having that in your bio. Tells you a lot of where this person is, right? My last week at Kickstarter, she's been laid off. It's been an honor and a joy to have served the comics community as an outreach lead, and I'll continue to do so on my own, offering free advice. In the meantime, here's my love letters to my creator and colleagues at Kickstarter. Now, this is the person that was in charge of trying to bring comics to Kickstarter. They failed miserably because early on, this is about maybe 3-4 years ago, when we were seeing the first kind of rounds of Jawbreakers, early Cyberfrog. These are big independent comic books that sold almost $500,000 or more each. They knew that Kickstarter had previously banned people that they didn't agree with in the comic book industry, and they went to Indiegogo. Now, we saw the I think the Batman creator also went to Indiegogo, and people freaked out about that. I'm not going to read this all the way through, but she says, just read the language. This is the hilarious part of it all. It breaks my heart to say that this will be my last week at Kickstarter. May 8th marked my second year at the company, and only a day after I found out that I would be among the 40% of the staff laid off. It's been an immense honor and joy, blah, blah, blah. Speaking of comrades, I want to shout out Kickstarter United. Organizing and winning our union has been one of the best experiences of my life. And you all still got fired anyway. A lot of good that union did. I talk about this with these clowns in the video game community that think a video game programmers union would have done anything. When there's no money, guess what? You're fired. It doesn't matter.
Money makes the world go around, the world go around, the world go around.
Organizing and winning our union has been the best experience of my life, and it didn't save you. Yes, it was tumultuous, stressful at times, but it was all worth it because our union and our incredible collective bargaining committee were able to negotiate a severance package for 4 months' pay with 6 months of paid COBRA for those making under the median salary of $110,000. That's the median salary at Kickstarter. That's insane. No wonder they're hemorrhaging cash. They're paying all these people that are more concerned about calling each other comrades than bringing in new business. Maybe you shouldn't have spent so much time making independent comic book owners feel unwelcome and feel like Kickstarter wasn't a place for them. And we can see even Yellow Flash tweeted, "You did a great job running them into the ground." And you see a classic get woke, go broke here. You see taking me in. And that's exactly what happens. And then, the next line of this is what Nerdrotic says here. We've lost another comic book shop.
Another one.
San Diego Comics to permanently close. Can't wait for Diamond anymore. This is May 9th. I was noting the other day that only a handful of comic book stores have actually stated they are closing down as a result of the shutdowns. What? Rich Johnson, is that not enough for you? Is it, even one closing down is sad. Anyway, some are recipients of state aid. Others have managed to deal with their landlord productively. Others have been able to put everything on hold. But some have indeed closed permanently. Bob Bellman, owner-operator of San Diego Comics of San Diego, has announced to his customers that he cannot put the decision off any longer. This is what happens. Yes, businesses go out of business all the time. And does their failure automatically mean that it's because of, Marvel's woke comics? Does this article on Bleeding Fool automatically mean that, it's only the woke comics that are being cut? Does Kickstarter failing mean that it's because they exclusively courted people that wanted only woke comic books? No, it doesn't prove any of that, but it's certainly a large part of it. You cannot deny that it influenced it. Had Ethan Van Sciver and Richard C. Meyer brought their books to Kickstarter, they would have brought the entirety of Comicsgate with them. That's like $1.5 to $2 million in community funding. It would have brought immensely more traffic to Kickstarter, and they're getting beat out by Indiegogo because Indiegogo doesn't engage in this kind of political nonsense that Kickstarter does. It's the exact kind of stuff that somebody who calls their coworkers comrades does. I mean, this is like, I can't think of a better example of somebody getting canned. The independent comic book industry is strong. You could argue that in a lot of ways it's stronger than the mainstream ones because they're still shipping their books They've got their distribution done. They're not shut down. They're still raising a ton of money, even with everybody laid off. And you've got people from Kickstarter with making $100 grand a year, and more concerned with what your political views are than whether or not your book is good. This is a perfect example of get woke, go broke. And, unfortunately, it carries down to the local comic book shop. If you focused on making good books and you focused on what was selling, certainly you could have one or two little pet projects, sure, but there's more than a dozen in production that are just straight trash. Maybe that means you could give a little more value in the books that are selling. Maybe if you didn't have 20 salaries of people with blue hair who just sit on Twitter all day and argue with their customers. Maybe you should start looking inwards, Marvel and DC, at some of your professionals that continue to alienate your customer base. If you have infinite money, comic book, shops are booming. All right, fine. I can understand that. When you're doing this, yes, you can laugh in the face of your consumer and put this garbage out that no one buys, and then you can blame us all when it fails. But right now, you don't get to do that anymore. And it's going to be that way for the next 5 years. And as more and more of these comic book shops continue to close down, guess what? Comic book buyers aren't buying digital. It's a failure. You tried to get everyone to convert to digital, and it didn't work. So guess what? When all these comic book shops close down, people aren't going to go out of their way anymore. Comic books are the ultimate superfluous good. You don't need it. People are going to find other hobbies and they're going to move on. And it's partly because you focused on garbage comics written by garbage people who antagonize the existing comic book base and tell them that they don't want their money. Well, this is exactly what you get. Hope you enjoyed this video. We'll talk to you again real soon.